fights with passion, and he inspires.
Are you ready for a war?
All right, welcome back to From A to Arbitration, and we've got a long episode today. There's a lot of reading, and it's going to put y'all to sleep 3 or 4 times, but the best way to learn, like I said, when I started educating myself with B-team decisions and arbitration decisions, that's all I did. I read all the time. I just read them and read them and read them, and so that's what I'm fixing to do to y'all. I'm fixing to read a bunch of sites. There's 7 sites. Now, Mallory has taken over from arbitration.com, and she's an absolute star, and I can't thank her enough for stepping up to do that. But she's going to put all 7 of these sites on the from arbitration.com website. And that way, as formal A's, advocates, y'all can go on there. It'll save y'all a lot of research time and pull those 7 sites off of there. And I'm going to read each one of them. Some are short, some are very long, and it's going to be boring as hell. But the best way to learn, to me, is repetition. Just keep doing things. Keep listening. Keep reading over and over and over again. And that's the best way to learn, to me. And so that's what I'm fixing to do. All 7 of them pertain to 6-day counts. And so today we're going to get full bore in 6-day counts, all right? Next week, I will not have an episode. We have the holiday, and I'll be spending time with my kids next weekend. And so I will not have an episode. On the following week, the Sunday, we're going to get into some in-depth 6-day count stuff. You'll not want to miss it. If we have 240,000 letter carriers, all 240,000 should be listening. We're going to start doing some in-depth 6-day count stuff that following week, all right, because we're in it right now. We're in it. And so I'm going to get to that a little bit later. I'm going to talk about a few things before that. First off, James Henry, I appreciate you, man, coming on. We were bushed. We were tired. We finished at 12:45 in the morning. And so he had a busy day, and he kept in contact with me all day. Matter of fact, I was like, man, you want to push this back? He said, no, you gave me your word you was going to do it. And so it was about 10 o'clock at night we started, and about 12:45 in the morning we finished. And so we trudged through it, but I love that guy, and I thought he did a fantastic job. I really do. It's a lot of tough questions, and that's how he wanted it. I told him that there was some tough questions. He said, put those first. And so that's what I did. And I thought he did a great job, and I look forward to him being the next president. He'll definitely bring integrity back to that spot. We're missing that right now, big time, and I've said that before. We're missing the integrity part of that position, and we'll surround ourselves with some all-stars as far as protecting city letter carriers, but we've got to have, first and foremost, integrity back in our presidential spot, and we're lacking that. Make sure you're getting on Reddit, and make sure you're getting on Discord, all right? Reddit is growing like crazy. Now, Reddit and Discord are different. You get on Reddit, they'll have topics, a lot of comments. There's grievance help. A lot of people be talking about past episodes. They help each other out. Discord's a little bit different. They have a lot of things going on Discord. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's got some extremely intelligent individuals on Discord. If you get on the channels on Discord, I'll just give you a for instance of what they have. You'll have they'll have different channels. If y'all don't know what it's about, they'll have different channels: grievance help, shop talk, the episodes, all the episodes. They'll have all the stuff that we talk about downloaded on there. And so if you don't want to get on the NALC website, you can get on Discord. It's got the National Agreement, the Constitution, the JCAM, ERMS, M39, M41, the ELM, all the articles, the EL 921, EL 801, the TRAP process, dispute resolution process, PS Form 4584. It keeps going on and on and on and on. They've got all of it on these different channels there. And you just click on that and you can download it. So it's extremely helpful. Here's the thing about Discord. When I was a teenager, I had a 50-gallon fish tank, and I had 4 piranhas in it. And all of them were named after the famous killers on the movies. Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Norman Bates from Psycho. Those are my piranhas. And I remember my dad and I, we loved them. And we would go fishing and catch just small shad or brim, whatever, and we'd throw it in there, and they would eat the shit out of it. I mean, just flat out devour it. And we would we'd hear my mom walking down the steps, and so we'd run away. So because we knew that she'd be mad if she looked in there and saw some fish just getting destroyed. So we'd run and lay on the couch, and he'd sit in his chair, and we'd act like we was watching TV. So hopefully she wouldn't look over there at that fish tank. That's Discord. So I thought it was funny. This poor guy, he got on there, and I watched his meltdown on Facebook. He got on there, and he was looking for a fight, man, and he found it. And so it was like putting that fish in with those piranhas. And on certain channels on Discord, it's, you know, they let their hair down. And so he got on one of those, and he was looking for a fight. And I'll peek in there every once in a while, and I got on there and saw that it was going on. And I was just like, "Hey, is everybody doing okay in here today?" And so this poor guy, he gets kicked out, right? Because the moderators, they'll let you go at it, but they will not let you threaten people. And so as soon as my man started threatening people, I saw the moderators getting involved, and they was like, "Hey, you know, watch the threats." Matter of fact, the last one was, you know, "We're going to warn you one more time, you'll be gone." And sure enough, he got kicked out. And so this individual gets on Facebook, and he's just wearing them out, you know. They didn't want this ass whipping or whatever he was saying. And so he just couldn't let it go, man. He came back a couple hours later, kept on talking about it. He got on my from 8 arbitration, the new one that's put up, and they kicked him off of that too. He had a bad day, but you know, it's not everybody's cup of tea, man. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but this poor guy, man, I watched the meltdown live. And so, but Discord's a fantastic thing, man. Just get on the right channel. You get on the wrong channel, it's like them piranhas, man. They'll be on that ass. But I love every one of them on Discord. They're huge fans. And, you know, the problem with Discord and Reddit is anybody can get on there because they'll use usernames. They don't use their real name. And so you'll have some from different camps get in there and try to cause some disruptions. But I'm all for that. You know, I'm for free speech. Whatever you want to do on there, have at it. Just don't threaten anybody. That's when they're going to take you out. But I know people from different regions get on there that are sent in there to kind of spy and look at stuff. And that's well documented. That's okay. Just don't threaten anybody. When you look at stuff like that, it goes to show that this union is extremely divided right now, more so than I've ever seen it. It's splintered. This union is. I think that comes from a lack of a true leader. We don't have leadership in this union anymore. We have a child running this union, and it shows. And he wasn't ready. Of course, he's protected by the executive council. That's well documented as well. But we don't have a true leader, and it's hurting us right now. We are hurting because of that. And 2026 can't get here fast enough, so we can get a real leader in there. There's some things that were sent to me, and it shows the lack of leadership in this union. These are things that I spoke about for a long time that people continue to send to me. And a true leader would squash these things nationwide. And I think James Henry and I were talking about this as far as national grievances, templates for national grievances, not national arbitration, but national grievances, our office time, things like that, stationary events. Of course, our president believes in these scanners and says that it's an inconvenience to be watched. It's not anything against the contract. And I say it's not about the discipline. You know, the union says, well, when they get disciplined, I think it's about the bullying. I think it's about the constant bullying of my people. And a true leader would not have that. I believe that. A true leader would make sure that that gets crushed. There were some things sent to me, and I'm going to read them to you. And this is where we're at. Here's just a few things. One is this person was asking about the episodes on stationary events. They said, I'm about to re-listen to these because my supervisors are going around and trying to tell carriers they have undertime and give them pivots off of stationary time. They get these numbers from the scanner data, and that cannot be the sole determinant of discipline. Read that again. I'm about to re-listen to these because, now this was something that was asked on Reddit. And that's why Reddit's so good, is people are like, hey, what was the episode Corey was talking about defeating stationary time? And people will come on there and they'll say, they'll either screenshot the episode or they'll send the link. And so it's very good. It says, I'm about to re-listen to these because my supervisors are going around and trying to tell carriers they have undertime and give them pivots off of stationary time. They get these numbers from the scanner data, and that cannot be the sole determinant of discipline. So here in this station, they're going around telling carriers they have undertime based off of previous stationary events. That's where we've gotten. You would have never heard of that before these memos. And unfortunately, without a true leader, this is happening. Because to me, when this stuff starts going around, you crush that. You crush that immediately, nationally. You get with, like I've always said, you get with your brightest minds and said, hey, make up a national template. This is going to every corner of the United States. Every region, every shop steward, every city letter carrier is going to understand that we're not going to tolerate this right here. It's still going on today. And unfortunately, when you address it with our leader, he says that it's an inconvenience to us. Now they're giving undertime based off of prior stationary events. That's the bullying that I'm talking about. When I say that it's not about the discipline. Remember that episode? It's not about the discipline. It's not about the discipline. It's about the bullying. It's about the toxic working environment that this has created for the city letter carriers. And my president should be in that ass. He should be in that ass. He should be a leader when we need a leader the most. And we are leaderless, right? We're a ship without a captain. And so we're afloat. They have abandoned us on this workroom floor. This is proof positive. They've abandoned us on this workroom floor because this should have been crushed a year ago or more. And we're still dealing with it. I'm going to keep going because it gets crazier. Here's the thing that we dealt with here in Nashville, but somebody put this up. It says, Postmaster is moving carriers off of office time in 1 hour. She believes this is a rule. So when the carrier moves to the street, reports show 2 clock moves. Then she's moving them to 7:33 parcel post delivery. No one is delivering parcels before their routes. She's also clocking folks out at night if they're still on the street. Now, I would say call the postal inspectors the OIG, but they won't do a damn thing about it. When that was happening here in Nashville, JB called the postal inspectors, the OIG. And he said, hey, I've got a manager that is clocking carriers out while they're still out delivering mail. And they told him, we're too busy. We can't handle it. But the motherfuckers will show up about a podcast. They'll show up about a podcast, but you got somebody stealing time, they won't show up. You see what I'm saying? You got somebody stealing time, they're busy. But they'll send 2 agents in on somebody doing a podcast. That shows you where they're at. They don't give a fuck about the city letter carrier. Right? They're management. More than management. I'd have that person removed. If I'm the business agent, I would probably get involved with that myself. If I knew about that. The shop stewards and the branch presidents need to contact the business agent They could probably handle it themselves, but if I'm a business agent, I want to know about those things. When I'm business agent, I'm going to say, if there's anything like this going on, any deletion of clock rings, any clocking you out within an hour, and you're still in their casing, let me know, and we'll address it. But these things are going on nationwide because we have no leader. Here's another one. Now listen to this. This is where it starts getting crazy. This is sent over the scanner. Carriers, we are not sitting on the clock. Any stationary time will be taken back. You hear me? What that threat is? Carriers, we are not sitting on the clock. Any stationary time will be taken back. What are they talking about? They're talking about deleting our time if they show stationary events. If they show inactivity events. Now they've gotten it to where they're threatening to steal our time. Do you know why they're doing that? Because we have no leader. We have no leader that has absolutely smashed this shit the second we heard it. Instead, he's defending that by saying it's an inconvenience. We have no leader in this union any longer. We're leaderless. The fact that this would come out over the scanner tells you what they think about us. The lack of respect they have for us. Saying we're going to steal your time if you have any stationary events. I read you those things back when they were saying they're going to get these 9 million hours or whatever it was, crazy figure. They're going to go get those. Now they're threatening to steal our time. You don't think so? Is that not how that read? Listen to this. Here's an investigative interview somebody sent me. This official investigative interview, which may lead to corrective action up to and including a notice of removal, based on the findings of this review. You are being interviewed for the following infraction. Listen to this shit now. Embezzlement of postal funds from May 3rd through June 15th of 2024. Embezzlement of postal funds from May 3rd through June 15th of 2024. Now, this is a regular shop steward inside an investigative interview with a regular supervisor, not an OIG agent, not a postal inspector. They're talking about criminal statutes, embezzlement of postal funds. That's a criminal act. During this interview, you will be asked a series of questions, and your responses will be recorded. Do you understand, as a Postal Service employee, you're required to participate in all postal investigations? Do you understand you're required to be truthful and honest during all postal investigations, and if you are found not to be truthful and honest, it can lead to disciplinary action up to and including removal? At what facility are you currently assigned? Is this post office the only facility you've worked? Where else have you worked? How long have you been a letter carrier? How many years of service do you have? Did anyone in management authorize you to take the 2 authorized street breaks together? Read that again. Did anyone in management authorize you to take the 2 authorized street breaks together? Now, first off, they don't tell a time frame, a date, or anything like that. You just told me it was a span of this date to this date. So you're going to have to be clear with that. Who specifically in management authorized you to take the 2 authorized street breaks together? Now, all of this is based off scanner data, right? They did not go out there and watch this individual. They're basing this off of scanner data. Listen to this crazy shit here. Are you aware accepting compensation for which you are not entitled to receive is embezzlement? This is an actual investigative interview sent to me. Are you aware accepting compensation for which you are not entitled to receive is embezzlement? Listen to this. Are you willing to reimburse the Postal Service for the monetary compensation you received, approximately $300? I'll read that again because you heard that right. Now, are you willing to reimburse the Postal Service for the monetary compensation you received, approximately $300? Now, this is an investigative interview. Are you willing to reimburse the Postal Service for the monetary compensation you received, approximately $300? So this person is out there working, right? They're looking at scanner data, and they see a stationary event. And so now what they're doing is, you saw that scanner message, I read it to you, about they're going to steal our time from us. Now they're saying the stationary time, you're going to start paying for that. Do you know why they're doing that? It's because we have no leader. We didn't have a president. When somebody said, hey, they're watching us based off of the scanners, based off of these memos, they're justifying that, and this motherfucker lose his mind and kick a fucking door in and say, hey, all of you, get in this office right now. This is what's happening. We're putting an end to this shit. Get a national template together and send that out to every region that we have. And bust these motherfuckers' asses for that. Since we don't have that, this shit right here is where we're headed. They're going to try to steal our time from us and make us compensate these motherfuckers for what they say is stationary time. I'm going to keep going. Did the union advise you to extend your street break? I'm read that again. Did the union advise you to extend your street time? As a shop steward, I'm going to stop that. So first off, you're not going to do that in this investigative interview. It's accusatory first off, and we're not going to ask that question. You're not going to say anything about the union in here. Did management authorize you to take your break at your place of residence? What is your specific address? Is there anything else you would like for me to consider regarding your improper designation and eventual compensation from the Postal Service before I render a decision on the outcome of my investigation? Now, that's the investigative interview. As a shop steward, what I'm doing is I'm going to leave there and I'm going to request union time. And I'm going to file a grievance. And this grievance is going to be a violation of the joint statement on violence and behavior in the workplace. Because what you've done is you've threatened me financially for something that you cannot prove. You're attempting to bully and harass me based off of stationary events, based off of scanner data. You did not go out there in accordance with 134 of the M39 handbook. Look, fuck my president. This motherfucker, he's so far out of this shit, man, with this. Put his ass aside. Fuck that. Put his ass aside. We're going to have to start doing shit down here ourselves because we've been fucking abandoned on this floor with this shit here. You're talking about stealing money from my people now? You've been bullying us for 2 years based off of this fucking shit with these scanners. 2 fucking years you've been bullying us. We've been pleading for help from our president, and he keeps sending out these little bitch-ass letters about it's an inconvenience. Now you have them telling about they're going to steal our time because of stationary events, because we didn't put a foot so far in their fucking ass that they wouldn't even think about doing shit like this. There should be so many grievances right now filed on these motherfuckers. They wouldn't even think about sending out a scanner message saying they're going to take our fucking time. This shit right here, I'm going to file a joint statement grievance on these motherfuckers for this investigative interview. Making the numbers is not the excuse for the abuse of anyone. That's what the joint statement says, right? It's a commitment from them to us. Now, I've got a supervisor threatening to steal my time. And they're also saying that I'm going to compensate them for something they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. They're spying and using covert techniques based off this investigative interview first, right? Then you're going to tell me I'm going to compensate you $300? I'm going to file a joint statement, and I'm going to ask that they be removed from supervising city letter carriers. Force that into arbitration and have these dumb fuckers explain that in front of an arbitrator. What are you talking about? You're going to make this carrier compensate you $300 for what? Based off of what? At what point in what handbook or manual are you looking at to say I've got to owe you shit for me out there doing my fucking job? What date did you go out there? During this time frame, during this May 3rd to June, whatever, how many times did you go out on the street and observe this individual? None. So you didn't do your job in accordance with 134 of the M39 handbook. Let me see all the 4584s that you've done during this same period of time on this city letter carrier. None. So what you're doing is you're taking for granted, based off of scanner data, that somebody's not working. And you're going to tell them that they owe you money? Have you lost your fucking mind? But that's where we're at, because we have no leader. We're in a bad fucking way. Years ago, back when I was initially at the Formal A, management was handing out letters of demand for express mail failures. We didn't lose the express mail. Express mail failures. They're handing out letters of demand. When that came up to me, I immediately called Egan. I said, I've got a letter of demand here for an express mail failure. They asked me to send them that via email, and I did. Egan told me, they said this, and it's in the file. It's still up at the branch office. You don't need to be speaking with me. You need to be speaking with the postal inspectors, because this is fraud. That's what Egan Services told me. Egan Accounting. They said, this is fraud. They cannot issue a letter of demand for that. They were making up these local letters of demand. That's what they were doing. They were not coming from Egan Accounting Services. So Egan tells me that's fraud. You don't need to be speaking to us. That's fraud. You need to be speaking with the OIG, the postal inspectors. And that's who I called. Now, the postmaster called me into his office and he said, hey, we're removing all of these. Anybody that it paid, we're compensating them, we're giving them that compensation back. Asked if I dropped it. I gave it to my president. I said, you do with it what you want. And so he dropped it. There will be some that will pay this money. Listen to me. There will be those carriers that get scared and pay this money to keep from getting disciplined. Do you know why? We have no leader. We did not kick the shit out of these motherfuckers the second this shit came up. It's an inconvenience. It is an inconvenience. They're talking about this individual paying them $300, and that is an inconvenience. They're sending out scanner messages, we're going to take your time from y'all. It's an inconvenience. We have no leader in this union. As of today, it's day 464 without a contract. Day 464 without a contract. Management has lost their ever-loving mind. Our union is more divided now than it ever has been. And we have no fucking leader. We have no leader. This shit here should be absolutely smashed. As a business agent, I have lost my mind right here. If I hear of this, if this comes to me, if somebody sent me this investigative interview, I'm going myself to that station and filing the grievance. I'm going to say, no disrespect, shop steward, I know you're kicking ass. But I'm going to put the full force of this region on this motherfucker here for giving that investigative interview. I'm going to be the one testifying in front of this arbitrator as a business agent to show the importance of this to say this shit right here will never be accepted. And this motherfucker right here that did it needs to be removed from supervising city letter carriers. They're a danger. They're dangerous. That is the ultimate violation of the joint statement on violence and behavior in the workplace. To give me an investigative interview that is threatening me by saying you're going to owe us $300 or you could be disciplined, brother. Hey, son, that would be a motherfucker's ass right there. But they can do that shit because we have no fucking leader. I'm reading you something else. Then I'm going to do a couple of shout outs. And this is another example of lack of leadership. Here's another screenshot. I remember this. It says, shouldn't be no street inactivities. Shouldn't be no street inactivities. To me, that's a grievance. That's a grievance. Shouldn't be no street inactivities. There's a screenshot of it. To me, that's a grievance. That's a violation of 134. And this person that wrote back, he sent back a scanner message and just blistered this shit. But to me, that's a grievance. Shouldn't be no street inactivities. What are you talking about? I'd grill them. What are you talking about? Shouldn't be no street inactivities. We got too many street inactivities. Based off of what? Show me the data. And then I'd bust their ass. But we have no leaders. Somebody sent me this, and this will be the last thing, and I'm going to give these shout-outs, and I've got to get into these sites. It's going to be midnight. Barner was speaking to some B teams, and he said, he's talking about the pie, P-I-E. So last week he was talking about the pie, and if we keep taking from the pie in grievance payouts, that the pie won't be full for a new contract. Saying our raise won't be that much because we keep taking money from the pie and grievance money. Now, this is your second in charge of our union. Now, and this is what he says. He keeps talking about the pie. And if we keep taking from the pie in grievance payouts, that the pie won't be full for a new contract. Basically saying our raise won't be that much because we keep taking money from the pie and grievance money. Now, how is it when one of the biggest issues that we have, and I've always said it's one of the top three, is management's failure to abide by grievance settlements, right? Constant issues with noncompliance. It's one of our biggest issues, top three to me. How is it that you have the second in charge of this union telling people that if we keep requesting these payouts, it's going to affect our contract? Think about that. We have an issue with noncompliance. How do we get management to comply? It's not rocket science. How do we get management to comply? First off, cease and desist. We have gone so far away from that arbitrators are now skeptical to give that to us. They're now hesitant to give that to us. A basic cease and desist. People are sending me arbitration decisions where arbitrators are saying a cease and desist isn't warranted. The most basic of things. We have gone so far from that because management has kicked our ass so much as far as cease and desist. We've taken it out of every resolution that we have, that it is getting more difficult to get those in arbitration now because of that, the path that we've taken. And thank God James Henry said those will be coming back. The cease and desist, this bitch-ass language and these pre-arbs about noncompliance, all of that's going away. It should have been done, but it's not. Because we have a second in command that's over that shit saying these grievance payouts, if they keep happening, it's going to hurt our contract. Could you imagine telling that to your B teams? To the city letter care? We have an issue of noncompliance. We've gone away from the cease and desist, and we need to quit asking for escalated monetary awards. What in the fuck has happened to us? As a union, what's happened? You see other unions busting management in the ass. Look at us. Hey, no more cease and desist. Put that canned language on these resolutions. Non-precedent, non-citable. And quit asking for so much money. What in the fuck is going on here, really? How do you expect us to hold management in any kind of compliance? What weapons do we have? What do we do? Somebody tell us how we're going to make management comply. They're not complying now. So how are we going to make management comply? If it's one of the most pressing things that we're dealing with, how are we going to make management comply? We've done away with the cease and desist because they've kicked the shit out of us on that. They've scared us to death. As a union, we're whimpering in front of them on the cease and desist. Now they've got our second in command telling them, quit asking for so much money. It's going to hurt us in contract negotiations. If you're letting management flip that on us about that, because to me, we're the ones that go in there and say, here's the reason why, Mr. Arbitrator, management can't come to the table with a better package. Here's the reason why, is because they can't follow the contract that we have. That's the reason why. It's part of the reason why they can't comply. And they're going to try to use that against us. Are we that fucking stupid at the top, or do they just think that we're that stupid, that we're going to believe that shit? If you can't flip that and spin that, we're in trouble. I can go into an arbitrator and say, they're talking about grievance payouts as the reason that we can't get a raise. I agree with them. I agree 100%. Their inability to follow a basic contract is costing us hundreds of millions of dollars. How much could my carriers get if they would comply? It's an epidemic of non-compliance in the Postal Service. It's an epidemic. As Congress said, it's systemic, the non-compliance. And we're going to say that we're going to let management use that against us? That they don't comply with the contract? What in the fuck is going on? I've got the second in charge saying, hey, you keep asking for that money, it's going to hurt us in contract talks. God dang, man. What in the fuck has happened to this union? Holy shit, man. These S&DCs, and I wrote this down. The S&DCs, the Postal Service and the union are hand in hand. They agree with the S&DC. Matter of fact, if y'all didn't know, it got voted on at the National Convention about the S&DCs that we would not oppose those. And that won. We had delegates voting with the Executive Council that we would not oppose the S&DC. Now, Tennessee, we sat down on that. We said, hell no, not here. Unfortunately, in my region, Alabama and Louisiana, most of them stood up with our business agent, not to oppose the S&DCs. I'm like, fuck y'all. Tennessee, we don't want those son of a bitches. We don't want to inconvenience the city letter carriers. And they're saying, hey, this is coming. You know, we need to embrace this. Fuck that. Fuck that. Here's my position on this. It's not our job to save the Postal Service. It's not our job to protect the Postal Service. It's our job to save and protect the city letter carrier. That's our job. The S&DC should be a last resort. Show me, first off, that you can comply and save hundreds of millions of dollars by complying. Show me that first, that you have some kind of effort to do that. Also show me that you have reduced your managerial positions by a drastic 70%. We don't need that many. Show me that you're doing everything that is in your power to do to cut costs before you affect one single city letter carrier. Show me those things, and we can come to the table about some other things. Until you do that, don't fuck with the city letter carrier. But the union voted overwhelmingly to not oppose the S&DCs. That's what y'all's delegates did at the National Convention. Tennessee, we did not. We said, fuck that. Fuck y'all. We don't want that shit here. You're not going to affect the city letter carrier. People are like, we love the S&DC. Good, keep it. Where you're at, keep that. Y'all can have it. Y'all can have it. But this union has lost its way. We're letting management dictate to us how we're going to do things. The grievance procedure. They're dictating those things to us now. S&DCs, they're dictating that to us. Now, Grosskopf put his foot in their ass up there in Buffalo. They failed. So if y'all want to know how to do that, call Grosskopf. He's with the CLC, by the way. But management is dictating to the union how we do things now. Exhibit A, Barner saying, no more cease and desists. Letting his counterpart tell the B teams that. Him telling us, quit asking for so much in the pie. There won't be enough pie for everybody if y'all getting these grievance payouts. That's a managerial position, right? I read that to y'all about Congress saying that the HIP was falsified. Management saying there were some discrepancies. Do you know who took on that line? Our president. There were some discrepancies, refusing to say that it's falsified. Management has overtaken our union. Somehow, it's overtaken our union. It's because we have no leader. We have no leader. All right, I'm going to get into these shout-outs, and then I've got to get into these sites because it's going to take me 2 damn hours to read this shit. But it will help you, I promise. Here's a shout-out to Michelle DaCosta, the best shop steward in the Bronx. Wakefield Station, Branch 36, from Rafael Ortiz, shop steward, Branch 1071, South Florida. Thanks, Danielle Smith, for the training you gave us. Here's another. Thank you for the dedication. Just wanted to give a shout out to my branch, 2168, especially to the ones who feel worn out and not heard, whether at the local level or national, and hang in there. There you go. I like that one a lot. So, branch 2168, my man said, don't give up. And we can't give up. Help is on the way. I promise you that. Help is on the way. We can't give up. We have no leader. We're getting one. All right? Shout out to Branch 385, Youngstown, Ohio. Especially Steward Ross Oliver. Thank you, Ross, for all the work that you do. You're doing great work. Most of us really appreciate everything you've done in East Liverpool, even though some of the carriers are mad. That's because they don't understand that management creates all the problems. That's why they're all so scared of you. Keep fighting, brother. We can't wait till you become an advocate. Hell yeah, I like that one too. So Ross Oliver, there's you some love, man. Keep kicking that ass. Carriers will not always be happy with you when you're holding management's feet to the fire, right? Keep kicking ass. I'd like to give a shout out to Heidi of Branch 1028, Bozeman, Montana. My friend, mentor, Formal A, and work mom. We're lions. We hunt wolves. We kill wolves, and we eat wolves. And we don't concern ourselves with the opinion of sheep. From Travis. There you go, my brother. I appreciate that. So Heidi, Branch 1028, Bozeman, Montana. There's you some love. Can you please do a shout out to James, the macho mailman, Palinkas of Nassau, New Hampshire? He did a great job of almost getting as many selfies taken at the Boston Convention as you did. Absolutely. So the macho mailman, Palinkas, James, Nassau, New Hampshire. There you go, brother. And ain't nothing wrong with some selfies, man. Here's another one. If it's not too much, I'd love to give it a shout out to my branch 213, Stockton, California, in your next episode. Thank you for all you do. Your effort doesn't go unnoticed. So there you go, branch 213, Stockton, California. Somebody reaching out want to give y'all some love. So there's your shout outs. Keep sending them to me. I'll keep doing them every week. It's coast to coast, baby. We're listening. And we're growing. We're growing. From 8 Arbitration is growing. And I know that there are people that don't like me, and I get it. I don't like me sometimes. I'll listen to the podcast. I was like, dude, that dude cusses too fucking much, man. And I don't like myself sometimes. And people are getting tired of hearing about from 8 Arbitration and all of these things here. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do for those of you who are getting tired of hearing of me. Because I'm with you. I'm with you. I get tired of hearing myself. So here's what we're going to do on From 8 Arbitration. I'm going to start doing videos on Discord so that y'all can watch me. We're going to do that. Getting back to grassroots training. We're going to start doing videos on Discord where I can put up things that y'all can see. We're going to start doing videos on YouTube, free of charge, where I can put up things for y'all so y'all can see. Basic training, ground level training, education like it should be. We're going to do TikTok, free of charge, right? Funny clips, videos, little snippets, and things like that. You've got Reddit, you've got Discord. From 8 Arbitration community on Facebook. You got From 8 Arbitration the Facebook page. I'm also going to be doing training for a CLC, a podcast for them. Getting back to basic training, right? Shop steward training. So those of you who are getting tired of me, that's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to start doing videos on Discord, on YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, Discord, From 8 Arbitration community, From 8 Arbitration the Facebook page, and CLC, a podcast for them. I told y'all we're just getting started. I'm not fucking around about educating my people. I am not fucking around about educating my people. Every bit of that, free. Every fucking bit free. On my dime, on my time. Why? Because I told y'all, the one thing that I can give y'all from me is to educate you. The most important thing I can give you is education. It does me no good to keep it to myself like these business agents do and these regents do. And our national president does. It does me no good to keep that to myself, everything that I've learned. What good is it? I'm going to give it to you. Everything that I know, I'm going to give to you. And we're going to whip these motherfuckers' asses in these grievance meetings, through the grievance process. That's what we're going to do. We're going to hold management accountable at every level. Everybody is going to be an expert. Everybody. I will never abandon you. I've said that. I told you we're just getting started. So there you have it. So those of you who don't like me, think there's too much of me, hang on, motherfuckers. We're just getting started. We're just getting fucking started, man. I can't wait. I can't fucking wait. All right, 6-day counts. Now, management hates 6-day counts just as much as we do. It's one of the biggest expenditures that they have. And the reason they had them is because they're too fucking stupid to do them right. Okay? There's a lot to 6-day counts. A lot to 6-day counts. We're going to educate ourselves on this podcast about 6-day counts. I'm going to read these 7 sites. It's going to take a long time, and I apologize. Hell, I'm already 53 minutes. And what I'll do is on this episode, I will put the timestamp on there of when I started so that you don't have to listen to all that rambling. You can just go straight into these sites. It will help you. This is the biggest way that I've learned is reading sites, arbitrators' opinions, management's arguments, the union's arguments, what the arbitrator considered, what he didn't consider, a lot of language. But I've got 7 sites. I'm going to read the same language over and over and over and over again. That way it'll get into your head. So city letter carriers, listen to it. You won't be grieving it, but listen to it, okay? Because it's going to help you. Like I said, some of these sites are very long. It is going to be boring. But it'll help you learn, okay? Some of them are very short, thank God. But it'll cover, these 7 will cover just about anything you're going to deal with. And then I'll pull some more, okay? There's very specific things. Now, these are kind of general overview. There's very specific things as well. I'll pull some for that. That way, advocates, you can go to from8arbitration.com. Mallory, my girl's going to put those up there for you, okay? You can get on this episode, pull these off, download them, copy them. They're right there for you. Shop stewards, same thing. Pull these off, read them, study them. Formal A's, pull these off, study them, read them, okay? And then, like I said, next week I'll be out with my kids. And the next week, we're really going to hit the ground running as far as deep diving into 6-day counts. Okay? And so we'll be ready. We'll be ready. Now, the first one, and I'm just going to read them. All right? I'm just going to read them. I'll fall asleep doing this. I'll have to edit it out where I fell asleep to keep it running. Because I hate reading. But I'm going to read. Because we're going to educate us. First one is from Donald J. Barrett. It's C34817. 34817. Advocates, write these numbers down. Now, you can get on this episode, like I said, and pull them up. But C34817. Donald Barrett. Here's the award summary. The union provided persuasive evidence that the examiners charged with conducting the route examination at the Conroe, Texas main post office during the period April 13th through 19th, 2019, improperly evaluated said routes and implemented adjustments on June 15th, 2019, utilizing incorrect data. The utilization of improper data resulted in routes that were not as close to 8 hours as possible and demonstrated a violation of the M39 handbook. Now, the reason that's important is that management can fail at every single thing. They can violate every single portion of Section 2 of the M39 handbook. And if those routes are 8 hours, arbitrators generally will not consider our grievance. We can show that management did everything wrong. And at the end of the day, if the routes are as close to 8 hours as possible, arbitrators generally will not side with us. Okay? It's imperative that we're showing routes at least 8:15. That's what I go by. At least 8:15 and over. And we're going to get statements after statements after statements after statements of carriers that their routes are overburdened. It's impossible to get back in 8 hours. They're doing everything humanly possible. These routes are overburdened. It's causing issues with their body. Anything you can think of when you get statements, have them write them. Put them in their statements. What these overburdened routes are doing to these individuals. It's imperative that you do that if we're going to get compensation. Much to the chagrin of Barner. He won't like that. I love compensation. I love it. Right? I love hitting management in the pocketbook because I want my carriers to have it in their pocketbook. Right? And so I'm not of the Barner ilk. I want money from my carriers. So here we go. I'm not going to read all where the hearing is, all that stuff like that. And they will have your issue statements. Another reason I love arbitration sites is people are like, well, what is the issue statement on a route count and inspection? They have it right there. Issue to be decided. Did management violate Chapter 2 of the M39 Handbook and Chapter 9 of the M41 Handbook via Article 19 of the National Agreement by improperly evaluating route count and inspection data and implementing improper route adjustments at the main post office in Conroe, Texas? If so, what is the appropriate remedy? Background. Management conducted a route and count inspection at this office beginning April 13th and ending April 19th of 2019. The implementation date for any changes as a result of this inspection was June 15th of 2019. The union argues that management violated various handbooks and manuals, M41 and M39, and Article 15 of the agreement when management failed to conduct the inspection in conformance with applicable provisions as stated above. Management argues that there is no harm demonstrated by the union to support any violation, and that letter carriers are paid at the overtime rate if the need is there. I'll read that again, because here's where we get them. Management argues that there is no harm demonstrated by the union to support any violation, and that's where our statements come into effect. And that the letter carriers are paid at the overtime rate if the need is there. So they're saying if the routes are overburdened, why are we going to compensate the carriers anymore? They've already been paid overtime, right? Management also argues that the union has failed to raise any issues of impropriety in the post-inspection period to identify any routes that resulted in any route being over or less than the required 8 hours. Relevant contract provisions. Article 15, the grievance procedure. Handbook M39, Chapter 2, mail counts and route inspections, Section 242.122. The proper adjustment of carrier routes means an equitable and feasible division of the work among all the carrier routes assigned to the office. All regular routes should consist of as nearly 8 hours daily work as possible, and that's one of the biggest sections. Section 242.122. They need to be as close to 8 hours as possible. Right? That's where we're going to get them. Section 221.11, schedule. The count of mail on all letter delivery routes, regular and auxiliary, must be for 6 consecutive delivery days on one-trip routes and for 5 consecutive delivery days, exclusive of Saturday, on 2-trip routes or 1-trip routes with abbreviated or no delivery on Saturday. It is not mandatory that mail counts begin on Saturday and continue through Friday, so long as they are made on consecutive delivery days. Section 241.4, providing carrier with a summary. A completed copy of the front of Form 1840, reflecting totals and averages from Forms 1838, day of inspection data, route examiner's comments, and analysis of office work functions and actual time recordings will be furnished the carrier at least 1 day in advance of consultation. Completed copies of Form 1838 will be given to the carrier at least 5 calendar days prior to consultation. Shop stewards get these decisions and read this language. This is where we get management because they're too damn lazy to do their job. It's very specific in when they must do things and how they must do things. Section 243.11c. The postmaster or designee must consider the comments of the individual who inspected the route, consult with the manager of the delivery unit, and consider suggestions from the carrier serving the route. And that's where we're going to get them most of the time. And consider suggestions from the carrier serving the route. Section 222.214b. There shall be established for each letter carrier route a base minimum time allowance for each of line functions 14, 15, 19, and 21, or Form 1838 where applicable. Those base minimum times shall be fixed at 6 minutes for line 14, 5 minutes for line 15, 3 minutes for line 19, and 9 minutes for line 21. If during the week of count and inspection the carrier's average actual time for any of those line items exceeds the base minimum for the function, the carrier shall be credited with the average actual time unless an adjustment to that time can be supported by appropriate comments of Forms 1838 or 1840 or any attachments thereto. In no event may the standard time for these functions be below the base minimum. Handbook M41, Section 911.2. The count of mail is used to gather and evaluate data to adjust routes fairly and equitably to ensure that the workload for each route will be as near as possible to an 8-hour workday for the carrier. Position of the parties in this matter. The union maintains that management has violated Articles 15 and 19 of the National Agreement when they made inappropriate adjustments to the routes of the Conroe, Texas Postal Facility on June 15, 2019, after conducting a route count inspection between April 13th through 19th, 2019. The union argues that while no full-time routes were eliminated, one auxiliary route, 1072, was eliminated, while letter carriers not on the overtime desired list were forced to work overtime and their routes continually exceed 8 hours each day. That management failed to credit proper time for line items during the evaluation process, instead made territory adjustments based upon times not reflective of actual times used for line 14 through 21 on Form 1838. The union states further that the examiner, during this route count, took the liberty of changing the letter carrier's entry of actual times for line items through the week of inspection and instead entered base minimum times on the Form 1838. That's the reason you have to read these things. There is a lot of stuff that management has to do. A lot of stuff, and they're too lazy to do it. And that's where we get them. The union argues further that management during this route count inappropriately disallowed time on the street evaluations. Evidence of record documents cases of disallowed time on numerous PS Form 3999s that should instead be considered appropriate and not time wasting as noted by the examiners. The union offers examples, but not limited to, checking one's vehicle, receiving or turning in accountables, participating in safety talks, retrieving hampers, picking up scanners and personal needs, customer interactions. The union maintains that time being disallowed by the examiners is so egregious that it defies common sense. Examples such as waiting for a gate to open, waiting for a school bus to pick up, or dislodge students, and awaiting security clearance at a jail to deliver its mail. Further, management failed its requirement to solicit any carrier's input prior to implementing adjustments, instead simply placing the form on the table with its results finalized. Now, unfortunately, a lot of that shit was happening in TRAP. Unfortunately. The carriers are not giving any data, which an examiner used to support the results of the evaluations, and or failed to justify why they selected the lower of the two street evaluations. The union states that routes are not adjusted to as near 8 hours as possible pursuant to M39 Section 242.122. Management also violated Section 243.11 by refusing to consider or seek any input from the very letter carriers serving the routes. Testimony offered at hearing by the postmaster supported these facts that management failed to consider any carrier comments, and further stated that changes could have been made with little effort after the review process, yet none were ever conducted. The union states that management's actions regarding this subject route inspection were arbitrary and capricious, and as such demands an appropriate remedy. The union requests this grievance be sustained in favor of the union, management cease and desist violating Chapter 2 of the M39 Handbook and Section 911.2 of the M41 Handbook, that management cease and desist violating the relevant provisions of the National Agreement via the National Level Settlement M1661. M1661. Further, the list route shall be adjusted to as near as 8 hours as possible, in accordance with the M39 Section 242.122 by providing relief within the time increments listed in the union's post-hearing brief. Lastly, the union seeks that each letter carrier at the Conroe, Texas Postal Facility be awarded the sum of $25 per calendar day from June 15th, 2019, date of route exam implementation, until the routes are adjusted to as near as 8 hours of work day per day as possible for the regular letter carrier assigned and or any other remedy the arbitrator deems appropriate. The U.S. Postal Service, this is their position. The service maintains that the union has failed in their contractual obligation to demonstrate their burden of proof of a violation of the agreement and or parts thereof. That the union has within their array of challenges the opportunity to seek auxiliary assistance on a route that is overburdened, or file a PS Form 3996 if their route is overburdened. Yet the letter carrier and the union provided no evidence that anyone ever did so at any time after adjustments were made on June 15, 2019. Further, the union has failed to demonstrate any harm caused to any letter carrier as a result of this route count and the implementation of. The service argues that during those limited times when a carrier is required to work beyond 8 hours, they are duly paid at the overtime rate. Further, the union had the opportunity to request a special route inspection per the 271G of the M39 handbook if any letter carrier was incurring over 30 minutes of overtime, yet they did not do so, instead filing this grievance instead. The service argues that the work-hour workload report for all city routes and controls shows clearly the total time used as a result of the subject route inspection, and this demonstration shows only a de minimis amount of time over or under the 8-hour benchmark required. The service argues further that testimony offered at hearing by the postmaster clearly demonstrated that letter carriers were provided copies of the PS Form 1838C each day during the route count, and each was instructed to bring any and all errors to an inspection team leader, yet the carriers and union withheld any information until the formal Step A process. Further, all documentation submitted to this file demonstrates the subject inspection was conducted in full compliance with the applicable provisions of the M39 handbook, and any remedial action if a route is found to be out of adjustment following an inspection does not call for a complete reversal of the route inspection, nor does it call for a punitive remedy. The Postal Service maintains that the remedy the union is requesting is improper and not warranted, and exceeds the boundaries which the arbitrator is held to pursuant to the national agreement. The service requests this grievance be denied in its entirety. Findings and opinion of this arbitrator. There can be hope only for a society which acts as one big family and not as many separate ones. And he put that in. That was from Anwar al-Sadat, Egyptian leader. The counsel for the Postal Service maintains that the service suffered many workplace issues that required everyone to pull together to get the job done during such crisis, and with a rapid decline in first-class mail, he is not wrong to articulate such a position. However, as much as Article 3 management's rights gives the service the opportunity to manage its mission on a daily basis, they must do so in tandem with all other articles of the national agreement. The issue before me that seeks a decision is whether management violated the agreement and parts thereof in the manner they conducted the route count, evaluated the data, and implemented the adjustments. The service argues that they conducted a fair inspection and did implement the results of such on June 15, 2019, without argument by the union except this grievance. The service argues that the union had means to challenge the results of the examination, but chose not to, instead choosing to file a grievance. First, let it be known that this grievance remains the union's right to respond to their belief of a violation of the agreement, notwithstanding any other avenue of appeal that may also have the they may also have. The union claims that management at the Conroe Post Office, through examiners brought in specifically to conduct a route count inspection the week of April 13 through 19, 2029, failed on various items that should have been credited to the letter carriers. The union maintains that management violated Section 222.214 of the M39 by not crediting proper time for line items during the evaluation process. They state, when the time recorded by the carrier is greater than the base minimum time, the time actually used must be entered in the appropriate column and can only be adjusted to a representative time if the route examiner provides specific reasons for the adjustments. I find no such reasons offered anywhere on PS Forms 1838C by an examiner or supervisor that offer a substantial or relevant reasoning. The union argues that collecting keys, picking up accountable mail in the morning before leaving for the street, performing the daily vehicle checks, attending the occasional safety or managerial talks on the workroom floor, and retrieving one's scanner all represent an average actual time, not extended time, as instructed by the examiner during this route count. Further, examples of disallowed time made on the street evaluations adds to the union's position of a violation of the agreement and parts thereof. Of particular interest are the deductions made for the letter carrier's interactions with customers. Now, this is the reason I pulled this one out. It's because you will have this a lot. Okay? And this case right here is perfect for this, why I pulled this out. Surely management, while not encouraging carrier to dismount and have coffee with customers, would not discourage the carrier from responding to a customer's inquiry or a simple, "Hello, how are you?" While much lately from higher quarters appears to minimize any time-wasting practices, the Postal Service remains a service to its customers, and the letter carrier remains an ambassador between the Postal Service and the customer. I'm going to read that again because this is beautiful. And you will need this case because they will deduct time for us stopping and talking to a customer. How y'all doing? How's your girls doing? How's your wife doing? Is she okay? Whatever. Of particular interest are the deductions made for the letter carrier's interactions with customers. Surely management, while not encouraging the carrier to dismount and have coffee with customers, would not discourage the carrier from responding to a customer's inquiry or a simple, "Hello, how are you?" While much lately from higher quarters appears to minimize any time-wasting practices, the Postal Service remains a service to its customers, and the letter carrier remains an ambassador between the Postal Service and the customer. Yet another deduction found throughout the case file is the carrier's need to sort DPS, small parcels and rolls, throughout his or her daily route. This is a common and necessary practice for the letter carrier to move the mail closer to him, herself, in order to have it available for delivery into each box along the route. Simply, if deductions are made for this practice, the carrier will not have the mail ready when the carrier arrives at another section of his or her route. While the examiner may view this practice and the time the carrier takes to perform it as a time-wasting practice, I believe it is a reasonable and necessary part of the letter carrier's performance and could reasonably be viewed as a safe way to work instead of having to reach back for more current mail or placing empty plastic containers in the rear of the vehicle. Yet another example of the examiner's deducting time needlessly is personal needs time, restroom breaks. There is no doubt that an examiner on any given day can find such needs to be excessive, and it may likely be that a letter carrier could take advantage of this need. However, how does one reasonably determine whether the carrier actually has a need on this given day without placing oneself in the area of his or her personal needs? If there is one category for reasonableness, I believe this may be the one. Yet the file before me gives examples where reasonableness may have eluded the examiner. The union cites a few examples where time was disallowed, such as waiting for a gate to open, a school bus picking up children or dropping them off, and a carrier who delivers mail to a jail and must wait for a security to clear them for entrance. A unique situation indeed that was not refuted by the service. Equally important in this matter is the service's failure to generally solicit the employee's input prior to implementing the adjustment of this route exam. The evidence before me supports the carriers impacted by this examination were also not provided the data used to support the results of the evaluations. In support of this position is the testimony offered at hearing by Postmaster Alston. This arbitrator found the postmaster to be a very credible witness, sincere, forthright, and knowledgeable. He was not evasive in any way and answered questions from both counsel with the same responsiveness. Postmaster also stated in the relevant part that he relied completely upon the examiners and when confronted with some of the numbers supporting the evaluation, stated that to his knowledge, more credit should have been given to the letter carrier. He also offered that changes could have been made prior to June 15th, but none were made. Further, he was unaware if anyone had spoken to the letter carriers about the evaluation times prior to the implementation date, that he trusted the examiners. He also agreed that some of the examiners' comments were inappropriate. As stated, I found the postmaster's testimony to be honest and forthright, and while his testimony alone does not lead me to my conclusions, in totality I find the union has demonstrated violations of the agreement, inclusive of the M39 handbook. The M39 provides an easy guide to conducting route examinations, but only if one chooses to follow this guide. In the matter before me, I find that the examiners failed to do so. More examples can be added to these findings, but I find no need to overkill when a few examples serve the purpose. For the reasons stated throughout, I find the union has demonstrated violations of the agreement and parts thereof. Award. Management must cease and desist any violations of the M39 handbook and section 911.2 of the M41 handbook. Management shall cease and desist any violations of National Settlement M1661. A second round examination shall be undertaken within 60 days. This examination shall include union representatives for the purpose of bringing the cited routes to as close to 8 hours as reasonably possible. The union shall be paid the sum of $2,000 to disperse as they see fit and to cover their costs for having to bring this matter to hearing. Nothing follows this, and that's the end of it. So there you had an arbitrator absolutely blister management on their incompetence and give the union $2,000 and 2 cease and desist, which is beautiful. And so that's the reason that management hates doing these just as much as we hate them being done. But we can grieve these. Unlike TRAP, we can grieve these, right? There's a lot to 6-day counts. Get in Section 2 of the M39 handbook if you want to be an expert at it. My branch president is an expert at 6-day counts, and I will rely on her a bunch because my station is fixing to go through them. I've had several arbitrations before with 6-day counts. We've been very successful, not because of me. I'm not an expert, but I've dealt with it in arbitration. And so, that's a very good site. Going on to the next one. All right, this is C34036. 34036. And it's another one from arbitrator Donald Barrett. And I'm going to read, I'll just read his, because the same language is the same arbitrator. I'm going to read his award. But in here, and this is for advocates, it says the union called the following witnesses. And there's 3 witnesses that they called, and then there was 5 that it was stipulated by the parties at the hearing that the following witnesses' statements contained in the moving papers case file represent what their testimony would be if presented at hearing. And so the union management stipulated to 5 witness statements. Now, if the union doesn't want to do that, make sure as an advocate that you do not let management stipulate your case away. As an advocate, if I want to call 8 witnesses and management says, hey, we stipulate that they'll come in here and testify to their statements. I have an issue with that as an advocate because I do not want management to stipulate my case away. I want my people to be heard. I want my witnesses to be heard, right? Because they're the ones who's going to show the harm. Statements, when you read them, are not as effective as carriers testifying to an arbitrator. So be careful and don't let management attempt to stipulate your case away. They'll try to do it. If you say I've got 8 witnesses, what are they going to testify to? Well, they got their statement. We'll just testify that, we'll stipulate that their testimony will be what their statements say. No, I want my people heard. That's right. That's the reason they wrote a statement. And so that's just something, make sure that you don't let management try to stipulate your case away, okay? If you want your witnesses to be heard, tell the arbitrator you want them to be heard. All right, same language. And this is the reason I like this one. His decisions are really good. Findings and opinion of this arbitrator. Now he's got some, I don't know what that is. Falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. In law, this simply means false in one thing, false in everything. And so I love that. False in one thing, false in everything. And so that means if you lied on this, you probably lied in all of it. And that's what I say about my president, is that he's untruthful here. He's probably untruthful in everything else he says, but that has nothing to do with this. The matter brought before me is familiar, as it is to the parties and the number of arbitrators. There have been a series of route counts inspections during a similar period of time as this matter throughout Dallas District stations. I have been privileged to hear no less than 2 other similar matters as this grievance, and the parties have provided me with other arbitrable decisions of a similar nature. The familiarity for this arbitrator is not limited to the parties' advocates, excellent witnesses, aptly prepared by counsel, and locations, Dallas stations and branches, but the similar claims made by each party that management has failed to adhere to the requirement of the M39 handbook, which outline the means and methods for conducting such inspections, or that management has in fact followed those citable dictates of the agreement and or parts thereof. Article 3 of the agreement allows management the exclusive right to maintain the efficiency of the operations entrusted to it, and also to determine the methods, means, and personnel by which such operations are to be conducted. There can be no doubt as to the challenge today's business climate places upon the Postal Service to maintain an efficient and cost-effective operations to its customers, particularly in light of the overly competitive business models employed by the Postal Service's competitors. Clearly, the union and its membership, all employees of the same Postal Service, suffer the same fate as the agency itself when such means of efficiency cannot be attained or the service's ability to attempt such efficiency is unduly hampered. That said, the parties also operate pursuant to a bargaining agreement long established between one and the other that spells out the terms, conditions, procedures, and processes by which the Postal Service performs many of its tasks that relates to its employees, their wages, and working conditions. Law, statute, and bargaining history guarantee such compliance. Arbitration itself is a child of that marriage between these very parties. When Article 3 of the agreement grants management such exclusive rights to manage their operations, it does so in conjunction with other contractual obligations that carry equal weight. Just as the Postal Service cannot operate without its employees, and the employees have no employment without the Postal Service, one article of the agreement must be fully recognized as another. Article 3 and Article 19 both apply with equal persuasion. In the instant matter before me, the union claims passionately that management of the Caesar Clark Station in Dallas, Texas, through the insight and direction of their operations program, support staff failed to follow the established mandates of Article 19, handbooks and manuals, and throughout that article, the M39 handbook, when conducting the route count inspection at this station from October 21st through October 27th, 2017, and the implementing the results of this inspection on January 6, 2018. After a thorough review of the voluminous record before me, the articulate testimony offered at hearing, and the parties' post-hearing briefs, including the previously issued arbitral awards, I am persuaded with clear and convincing evidence that the union's position is supported by this record. While management's witnesses stated that the letter carriers at this station enjoyed a dry run, where the forms associated with the route count inspection were fully explained to them, the evidence before me disputes the other requirements of the M39 handbook. Section 243 of the M39 handbook is specific regarding the obligation to consult with a carrier in these situations both before the actual inspection and after the week of inspection. Section 241.4 states in relevant part, a completed copy of the front of Form 1840 reflecting totals and averages from Form 1838, the day of inspection data, route examiner's comments, and analysis of office work function and actual time recordings will be furnished the carrier at least 1 day in advance of the consultations. Completed copies of Form 1838 will be given to the carrier at least 5 calendar days prior to consultation. There is no evidence before me that supports management having done this as prescribed by the M39 handbook. The clear and convincing evidence supports the union's contentions that Form 1838s were placed before the letter carriers on all in 1 day, and they were simply instructed to sign, with little to no information shared with the carrier supporting the numbers and changes displayed before them on the forms. I'll read that again. The clear and convincing evidence supports the union's contentions that the Form 1838s were placed before the letter carriers all on one day, and they were simply instructed to sign, with little to no information shared with the carrier supporting the numbers and changes displayed before them on the forms. There is no evidence that the carriers were provided the 1838 a day before, nor is there supporting evidence that management met their obligation to provide the supporting documentation, completed copies of Form 1838, at least 5 calendar days prior to the consultation. In fact, to my observation, based upon the record before me, the use of the word consultation is misplaced entirely. I find reason to presume the obvious, that management simply conducted this count inspection and placed the results before the letter carrier for their acknowledgement only. Management states they gave consideration to comments offered by the letter carriers at the final consultation, but at that point the cost and effort needed to make any further changes would be prohibitive. I agree. Because of that point, management's position regarding this route count inspection had been set in stone, and the letter carrier's comments were irrelevant to the process and the implementation of management's findings. I find little to no evidence of any solicitation or consideration of letter carrier's input regarding the possible changes to a route or to the union regarding the loss of routes in this station. Further, I am in agreement with the union's contentions that management violated sections 242.344 and 242.345 of the M39 handbook in the manner by which the inspection team made disallowances for time during the street evaluation part of this inspection. Throughout the record before me are instances of time disallowances for such things as personnel needs time, the need to use a toilet while on the route. While letter carriers allowed 2 breaks, normally one in the office and one on the street, I find that management's position as stated in the record that the street break is for the purpose of personnel needs to be unreasonable and illogical. Now watch out for that when we do these, all right, when these new 6-day counts. We have a 10-minute break. If I have to go use the restroom during the period after that or before that, make sure that management doesn't try to disallow that time, saying that we should have used the restroom on our break, because they will. I recognize that there is always the possibility an employee may abuse such an opportunity. The fact of this is that the need to use the toilet while on the route is not a privilege. It is very likely a need that most often needs to be fulfilled at a reasonable time from awareness. Time was disallowed for drinking water or hydrating while on the route. I also trust that a reasonable person becoming aware of a letter carrier in Texas drinking water or another such drink to remain hydrated is more a necessity that should be encouraged instead of penalized. Seems like they've had issues down in Dallas before, right? Before Mr. Gates. They're trying to disallow time for us stopping to get a drink of water. There is further evidence throughout the case file while the examiner disallowed times with no explanation whatsoever. While these instances may not represent the majority, it does represent the arbitrary manner by which the service conducted this count inspection at the Caesar Clark station during December 2017. It is obvious from the record before me that the Postal Service, in this instance, undertook a process that is fully regulated through Article 19 of the agreement, the M39 handbook, and simply treated the letter carrier involved as a collateral, unnecessary part of the process, with indifference towards their right to participate as described in the M39 handbook. There is simply no other reasonable conclusion that can be reached in this matter. Management was insistent on conducting this process on their own, with results most favorable to their preconceived positions, and demonstrated very little, if any, intention to consult with the letter carrier or the union. Doing so, consultation, is not an option. It is a requirement that subscribes to the proposition that management will conduct a route count inspection that is fair to both parties, that seeks adjustments, if needed, that in the end bring the route to as close to 8 hours as possible. While the very articulate and capable advocate for the service objected passionately to the union's submission and the arbitrator's acceptance of the work-hour workload report for the period January through April 30th, 2019, the purpose of such a management-generated report details the hours of each route at Caesar Clark during this cited period. Management argues that this report is based on clock rings of the employee and is not truly reflective of the total hours because local management must make adjustments to the employee's clock rings made in error. I did not find this argument to be persuasive. This is not a daily report, but instead appears to reflect a 4-month period of time. And during this period, after the implementation of the route count inspection demonstrates routes that are not close to 8 hours, further supports the union's contentions. Arbitral precedence has long established that unless some deliberate attempt to mislead the other party is disclosed, or if new evidence appears substantially immaterial, an arbitrator will be disinclined to rule the matter out. It is for the reasons that the Union 1 has been accepted, and why I find it to be relevant to the matter at hand. This management document does not change the issue or broaden the scope of this grievance, but does highlight what appears to be a very important result of this route count inspection, and therefore makes it relevant. As I previously stated, and sincerely believe that the Postal Service faces new challenges to its very existence every new day and needs to be the ability to respond to those challenges as well as the support to do so, many of those challenges may result in staffing changes, realignment of routes, elimination of facilities, etc. However, while the service needs the freedom to perform in today's business environment, they cannot do so in a vacuum. They must adhere to the bargaining agreement long in place that mandates compliance. Some of our national leadership needs to read this, right? Talking about compliance. Unlike that old adage that states it is easier to seek forgiveness than permission, the cost of non-compliance is far greater than simply seeking forgiveness. Somebody send this to Barner, please, and Renfro. For the reasons cited above, I find that the union has provided clear and convincing evidence that management has violated the National Agreement, Article 19, M39 Handbook. Award, the grievance is sustained. Management is ordered to cease and desist from any future violations of the agreement, M39 Handbook. The results of the subject route count inspection shall be maintained only until a new route count inspection is held at the Caesar Clark Station within 120 days from the date of this award. The union shall be informed of the details of the new count throughout the entire process, including the consultation procedure. Each letter carrier at the Caesar Clark Station relevant to this grievance shall receive a one-time payment of $500. The parties shall jointly determine who is relevant. The union shall receive a one-time payment of $5,000 towards the cost of processing this grievance. And so there's two great decisions from Arbitrator Barrett that covers a lot of things that you are going to be experiencing in your 6-day counts. When he talks about submitting the work hour workload report for a period of time after the implementation, that is huge for advocates, right? Because all arbitrators are going to allow that in, because there's no other way for us to show the routes if they're close to 8 hours as possible, unless we have a period of time after the implementation to get that data. I remember when we had the route count inspection in Woodbine Station in Nashville. This was years ago. It was in front of Arbitrator Roberts. And Rusty Godlewski was my best witness. And matter of fact, the arbitrator told management after he finished, y'all need to hire that guy to do y'all's 6-day counts, because he was so well versed in 6-day counts. But Rusty had pulled all this data. And we had it, and we went through each one, and he did a fantastic sheet showing each route, what their routes were averaging as of this time period. And most of them are about 8 hours and 45 minutes after this 6-day count. The postmaster of the city, he's testifying, and management leads him into this question. And it's a question that I was going to ask, but they led him into this question. And they said, are the routes as close to 8 hours as possible today? He said, yes, they are. Are the carriers happy? The carriers are very happy with their routes. They're all as close to 8 hours as possible. When he said that, now this was just for show, I looked at Dave Clark, the president, was my TA. And I looked at him and I said, hey, get up right now while he's testifying and leave. and get me those reports that we have pulled. And so Dave gets up and walks out, and everybody's looking. I look at the arbitrator and said, I apologize. He should have waited. I wanted that for show. So he goes and gets these reports, and he comes back with this handful of reports. Everybody sees him. These handful of reports, and he gives them to me, and I'm like, thank you, have a seat. So anyway, they knew what was coming. My first question to this postmaster, I said, now you testified under direct that the routes as of today were as close to 8 hours as possible and all the carriers were happy. I said, that's what you testified to, right? Yes. I said, Mr. Arbitrator, I'm going to include these work hour workload reports as Union Exhibit 1. They did the same thing as this. They objected. I mean, went crazy. And I said, Mr. Arbitrator, two things. I can put these in anyway through my witness because it shows that the routes are not as close to 8 hours as possible as required. I cannot do that through the grievance procedure because you have an informal and a formal, and I can't have those documents at the informal and formal meeting. And he wrote that in his decision. He said that wouldn't be a long enough period of time to show exactly how much these routes are overburdened. And I said, second, I'm going to impeach his testimony with this documentation. I said, I'm going to show you that he's being untruthful. And so he allowed him. And we won that arbitration, and it cost them close to $300,000. I remember every carrier in this station got almost $12,000. And so that's the importance of getting those clock rings, the work hour workload report for a period of time. Your arbitration is going to be 3 months. You have the formal meeting, you got the B team decision. It'll get sent to the the business agent, and then they will assign an arbitration date, generally about 2 to 3 months. During that period of time, get those work hour workload reports. Request them, and you can have those readily available. You can look at the routes. If they're close to 8 hours as possible, we may need to consider that grievance going to arbitration. But if you have half the routes are showing 8:15 or over, then you take them with you. And you can show the arbitrator, hey, these routes as of today are overburdened. And we're going to try to hit them in the pocketbook, all right? All right, here's another one. C34864. C34864. And this is arbitrator Eileen Cincy. 34864. And I'm going to read her decision. And get these, and you can read the positions of the parties. They're all going to be generally the same. But these decisions, the discussions, that's the reason I want to read these, because they cover a wide variety of things that you're going to be encountering, okay? The argument made by the union at arbitration focused on unexplained alterations made on the 1840 and 1840 Rs to both office and street times. As a result, the union argues that improper times were selected without adequate explanation. The M39 handbook provides only 2 ways that office time can be determined. Under normal conditions, the office time allowance for each letter route shall be fixed at the lesser of the carrier's average time used to perform office work during the count period, or the average standard allowable office time. In a national award, which is binding precedent in regional arbitrations, arbitrator Benjamin Aaron ruled that the Postal Service could not reduce office time below the average standard allowable time, even when there was evidence that a carrier was regulating his time. In a regional decision cited by the union, arbitrator Donald Olson applied the arbitrator Aaron's decision to find that the service could not reduce the grievance office time to less than the standard office time and less than the net time used by the grievant. In this case, the union introduced evidence including the 1840 and 1840 Rs, demonstrating that the office time selected for a number of routes was not the lesser of the average time used by the carrier or the average standard allowable office time. On a number of routes, the office time selected was lower than the lesser of those two numbers. Based upon arbitrator Aaron's binding national award In that case, the service therefore violated Handbook M39 in its selection of office times. The M39 Handbook also provides only two choices for determining base street times. Section 242.321 provides that the base for determining the street time shall be either A, the average street time for the 7 weeks random time card analysis and the week following the week of count and inspection, or B, the average street time used during the week of count and inspection. M39 section 242.347 provides that all time disallowances and related comments will be noted on Form 1840 or attachments thereto, and furnish the letter carrier at least 1 day prior to the consultation. The union disputed the street time selected by the inspectors for a number of routes. It pointed out that in most cases, management used the lower of the two possible numbers it could have selected, and did so without giving adequate written explanations on the 1840s and 1840Rs for the choices. The union claimed that the violation resulted in street times for the routes being a total of 3 hours and 7 minutes less than the correct amount of street time. I find the evidence to whether the street time selections violated handbooks and procedures to be inconclusive overall. In most cases, the lesser of the two acceptable methods of calculating base street time was used. The union has not established, however, that using the lesser to the two possible base times is an automatic violation. While some of the written explanations for deductions are not self-explanatory to a third party, in the context of discussions that occurred during the consultations, those explanations may have been sufficient. Having concluded that a violation occurred with respect to the calculation of office time, I turned to management's argument. At the arbitration hearing and in its post-hearing brief, management argued strenuously that the union's evidence and argument should be excluded because it was raised for the first time at arbitration. If the union did not properly raise the violations it alleges at arbitration at the lower levels of the grievance process, its arguments cannot be considered and the union cannot prevail. It is essential, then, to closely examine the grievance record to determine whether the union made management aware of its position prior to arbitration. There is no question that a comprehensive documentation was included in the grievance record at the Formal A level. The 1840s and 1840Rs were part of the record. The union also prepared and introduced into the Formal A record a document summarizing the office and street times selected for each route, the average times on the routes, and the adjustments made as a result of the inspection. The parties agree that they discussed documents at the Formal A, but disagree about the specificity of the discussion. Walter Barton testified that he specifically discussed the routes using the summary document that showed the times used and adjustments made on each route. Kevin McGee, however, testified that Mr. Barton pointed to times but said nothing specific. The union's Formal A contentions must also be examined to determine whether they specifically set forth the arguments made by the union at arbitration. Two separate written contention documents were included in the record. Both were provided to management prior to or at the Formal A meeting. The union contentions specifically identified several problems that the union has argued at arbitration. They stated that management had, in many cases, reduced street times without advising why they had been reduced. The contentions further stated that the routes had times added to office and street times in violation of established procedures. Management's Formal A denial, summarizing the union claim, notes that the union argued that additional time had been added to office and street times in violation of handbooks and manuals. Management was clearly on notice at Formal A then that the union was disputing the office and street times that had been selected and the lack of explanation for additions or deductions that were made. Given the amount of evidence shared by the parties at Formal A, testimony that the parties discussed that material, at least to some extent during the Formal A meeting, and evidence that both parties understood the grievance to encompass arguments over the use of improper office and street times without adequate explanation of deviations, it would be difficult to conclude that the union's argument at arbitration was a surprise to management. It is true that the grievance at the lower levels was broader and encompassed many more arguments than the ones on which the union focused most closely at arbitration. However, The arguments that form the basis of the arbitration are included within the more broad-based arguments raised below. Specifically, the issue on which the arbitrator has found a violation, the use of improper office times, was included in the union's formulae contentions. There is further issue in this case as to whether any argument about the selection of improper times was waived when carriers signed the 1840 Rs during the consultations after the county inspection. The carriers did not have union representation at those meetings. The parties have stipulated that 4 union witnesses, if called to testify, would attest that their signatures on the forms did not signify their agreement the information contained in the documents and that they didn't understand that information at the time they signed. The parties also stipulated that a management witness would testify, if called, that he explained the deductions before he asked the carriers to sign. Although I accept the evidence that management representatives explained the documents to carriers and gave them an opportunity to ask questions, I also accept that individual carriers might not have fully understood those explanations. Certainly, they might not have understood that the selections of office times on those forms might have violated handbooks and manuals that had been imported into the national agreement through Article 19. The fact that individual carriers signed the 1840R at the consultations did not waive the union's right to grieve the county inspection. The filed a timely grievance contesting the fairness of the county inspection, and that grievance can go forward despite the signatures obtained during the consultations. For the reasons stated above, I find that management violated the M39 handbook in its selection of office times on a number of routes that were lower than the lesser of the 2 allowable times. That remedy for the violation is set forth in the award. And so her award was management violated M39 handbook via Article 19 of the National Agreement by improperly conducting the mount count and route inspections at the Baldwin Station Post Office. As remedy, the arbitrator orders that a new count and inspection be conducted if the parties are unable to agree on inspection through the JRAP process. The new count and inspection shall be conducted within 45 days of the date of this award. And the reason I like that is because management comes in there with the 1840 Rs, and they give them to the carriers, and they talk to the carriers, and they sign them. That does not mean the carriers understand what they signed. And management will attempt to use that against us. They'll say, hey, the carriers signed off on this. They're in agreement. That don't mean I'm in agreement. That just means I signed off on something you had me sign off on. That does not mean the carriers understand what you're telling them. And that's a huge decision for us there. And that's a very good one to have if all your carriers sign the 1840R and you go up to me and say, hey, what did management talk to you about? Well, they didn't talk to me about anything. I just signed this form right here. What were you signing it for? They just told me to sign it. They had no union representation in there telling them not to sign it. There's nothing in there saying that the carriers understood what they were signing. And so that's a very good decision there because management will attempt to say that. Hey, they signed the 1840Rs. They understood what we were doing. That doesn't mean that. That just means they signed the 1840R. All right. Next one. I told y'all this is going to be long and incredibly boring. I apologize. This next one is C33243. C33243, and it's from Peter Clark. And I'm going to read his analysis. And this one's a very short decision. But I love this decision. The grievance calls into question the Postal Service route count inspection conducted in February of 2017. The union contends that the Postal Service failed to consider several factors that would have resulted in significantly different adjustment for the grievance route. The Postal Service believes that the route count inspections were accurate and that there is currently no basis to have a new count inspection. After a careful review of the record, the grievance is sustained for the reasons stated below. Ann Taylor, the union steward for the Conroe Post Office, testified that she carefully investigated the information used by the Postal Service to adjust the route. Among the many things the Postal Service failed to account for was postal management excluded times they should have included and included days and times that should have been excluded when they completed Forms 1840B. That caused the street time credit for the control routes to be skewed. and not representative of a fair day's work. The Postal Service also failed to add auxiliary assistance to the total street time the carrier received. Most telling, the Postal Service failed to conduct a route adjustment consultation with irregular carriers assigned to the Conroe Post Office routes. The Postal Service failed to discuss. Now, here's all these things now. This is the reason I love this decision. I'm going to read that right there. But this is the things that management will fail to do because they're too damn lazy to do their jobs. Most telling, the Postal Service failed to conduct a route adjustment consultation with irregular carriers assigned to the Conroe Post Office routes. The Postal Service failed to discuss route inspection data, route examiners' comments, the travel to route, travel from route, and street break time. In addition, the Postal Service failed to consider the suggestions for adjustments made by the regular carriers at the Conroe Post Office. Ms. Taylor systematically broke down with specificity each way in which the Postal Service failed to properly consider all available information to properly address the grievance route. Finally, the Postal Service also failed to provide requested information to the union. The requested information was documents that should have existed to support the Postal Service's count and inspection. Without them, the reliability of the route adjustment is seriously called into question. With such overwhelming evidence presented, it was clear to the arbitrator that the route adjustment was not based on reliable data. Therefore, the grievance is sustained. Based on the foregoing, the grievance is sustained. The Postal Service shall cease and desist from any future violations of Chapter 2, Section 242.122 of the M39 Handbook, Chapter 9, Section 911.2 of the M41 Handbook, and National Level Settlement M1661. So, new stewards that are having to deal with all these, you hear these things a lot, these things that I'm reading to you. Chapter 2 of the M39, Section 242.122, Chapter 9, Section 911.2 of the M41, and National Level Settlement M1661. There's a decision on core in the Conroe Post Office. The grievance route shall be immediately adjusted to as near as 8 hours work per day as possible by reducing it by 48 minutes. All other relief requested by the union is denied. So there's another very good decision. It tells you everything that management must do. Talking about the carrier consultations. Talking about the core consultations. That case we had in Woodbine, going back to that. We requested all the core documents. We never got them. We never got any of the core adjustment documents. In the hearing, we raised a huge issue about that. Matter of fact, 90% of my witness's testimony was about the information that he requested that he never received. And I went down through each thing. Why did you need this? What is it and why did you need it? Down each one. During management's testimony, the advocate for management asked the witness for management about the core adjustment and if the core adjustment was done properly. And they said, yes, the core adjustment was done properly. And they come back, are you sure it was done properly? And I'm just sitting here writing on my pad to Dave. I was like, these fools. And so when it came time to cross-examine, I asked the witness, I said, you testified under direct that the core adjustment was done properly, and you're 100% positive of that. Absolutely it was done properly. I said, there's not a doubt in your mind, is it? I said, I can tell by your testimony. There's not a doubt in your mind that y'all did it properly through core. Yeah. I said, so you've seen the core documents? Yes. I said, we asked for those core documents and they were never provided. I said, but your testimony here today is they do exist and you saw them. And they realized then that they had been caught because we had requested the core documents and we never received them. And here he is testifying that he looked at them and everything was proper. So they just buried their asses in that hearing. But so all of these things, if you're not receiving information, make a big to-do about it. It's our burden, right? It's a contract case. It's our burden. We meet our burden through documentation that we requested. Go down each line. What did you request and did you receive it? If not, how did that hamper you meeting our burden? Okay? So remember those things. All right, here's the next one. C32635. C32635, and this is arbitrator Catherine Durham. Okay? Arbitrator Catherine Durham. All right, here's what she says. Opinion. Information denial. The case file clearly details what information was requested, when it was requested, who requested it, and when the requests were received by management. The Postal Service has not argued that it actually provided the requested information to the union. Management failed to give a satisfactory explanation for not providing the requested information. The information was indeed relevant and important to the union and the bargaining unit for a timely resolution of the significant overburden route situation in Middletown. A monetary remedy as requested to each carrier is appropriate. Out of adjustment route remedies. Now, this case is fantastic because it gives so many sites about remedies for out of adjustment routes. So make sure you get this one above all of them. It's C32635. Out of adjustment route remedies. The parties stipulated that, pursuant to the results of the CD RAP that was implemented at the Middletown Post Office in October 2015, 17 regular city routes and 1 vacant route were out of adjustment because they exceeded 8 hours and 15 minutes. Remember what I said earlier? Most arbitrators are going to look about 8:15. If we can get routes that are 8:16, let's grieve that. 8:15. The Postal Service agrees that the union has also established the results of the CD RAP show that the formal review and route inspection performed in April of 2014 was done improperly and not in accordance with Chapter 2 of the M39 Handbook. Remedy for every carrier, even if route in adjustment. At arbitration, union requests a monetary remedy for every carrier who's worked at the Middleton Post Office during the remedy period, including CCAs, based upon the assertion that the overburden routes affected all carriers in the office, including those who were not assigned to overburden routes and who were on the OTDL. The union claims that an enhanced remedy is appropriate in light of 2 prior arbitration awards out of the Middleton station, on the basis that management failed to learn from those earlier awards. Arbitrator Daniel Oliver held that management violated the national agreement and a prior grievance settlement when it failed to adjust 5 routes that the parties had agreed were out of adjustment. The remedy here awarded was half hour of overtime pay to each carrier who worked overtime carrying one of the 5 routes at issue, including PTFs, during the relevant remedy period. A half hour overtime to carriers on 5 affected routes only who worked overtime. Arbitrator Timothy Tobin decided another route adjustment grievance in this Middleton Post Office in 2005. There, the arbitrator held that management committed multiple intentional violations of the M39 with respect to route inspections and adjustments, including distorting the inspections by curtailing some of the mail on the day when the inspections were performed. He explained that his goal in fashioning a remedy was in part to get management's attention and to ensure that a similar breach will not occur again in the Middletown area. Arbitrator Tobin awarded a half hour of overtime pay to all carriers at the Middleton Post Office, including PTS, for each day they worked at the office during the remedy period, excluding those carriers who had already been compensated via the Oliver Award. Half hour to all OT carriers at the station for each day worked. No requirement that they actually work the overtime. The union urges that any remedy that is not equal to those awarded by arbitrators Oliver and Tobin would be demoralizing and would set a bad precedent in light of the fact that management at the Middleton office has not learned its lesson from these prior awards. This is not clearly the case because the violations seem more egregious in 2004 and 2005 because management was knowingly violating recent agreements. Additionally, it has been 11 years since those cases and management has turned over. There is not a direct link between those cases and the facts presented here. Therefore, a remedy is not provided to carriers whose routes were adjusted appropriately. History of cited remedies and comparator regional decisions. The union relies upon awards by arbitrators Mark Rosen and Jonathan Klein regarding the same violations at issue here. Arbitrator Rosen awarded 1 hour of overtime to all carriers and PTFs in the station for each day they performed overtime during the remedy period. As a basis for this remedy, he cited management's history of refusals to abide by settlement agreements and arbitration awards and its intentional disregard of its obligations under grievance settlements, including an earlier settlement of the same grievance in which it agreed to pay carriers $10 per day and then refused to do so. 1 hour overtime to every carrier in the station for each day they performed OT. In the case there, arbitrator Jonathan Klein awarded 1 hour of penalty overtime for all carriers at the station for each day worked during the remedy period, regardless of whether the carrier worked overtime. He explained his rationale stating, "The remedy reflects the persistent violation by local management of the parties' own settlement agreement, Step B decisions, and the national agreement. 1 hour penalty OT for all carriers in the station for each day worked, no requirement that they were actually worked overtime." However, in two other awards, arbitrator Klein issued a much more limited remedy for route adjustment violations. In the cases there, arbitrator Klein fashioned remedies of a half hour of straight time pay for time worked over 8 hours and 15 minutes for each carrier at the station who averaged over 8 hours and 15 minutes on a regularly scheduled day during the remedy period. He did not explain his rationale for either of these awards. A half straight time pay for time worked over 8:15 for each carrier and station who averaged over 8:15 during the period. Again, you're looking at about 8 hours and 15 minutes. That's where generally arbitrators will generally put that mark, about 8:15. And you have a couple decisions here now that are backing that up, the 8:15, okay? Management cites awards by arbitrators Sherry Rose Talmadge and Tim Brown. Arbitrator Talmadge awarded a remedy based on arbitrators Klein's 2014 decision, a half of straight time pay for time worked over 8 hours and 15 minutes for each carrier at the station who averaged over 8 hours and 15 minutes on regularly scheduled days during the remedy period. She mentioned that the purpose of her award was to compensate carriers for personal time they lost when they were required to work overtime, but did not adjust her award to exclude carriers on the OTDL. In the case there, arbitrator Brown awarded a similar remedy as to arbitrator Talmadge and the 2014 and 2016 Klein decisions. He specifically included utility carriers in his award, and he carved out the months of June, July, and August and December from the remedy period because he said the summer months and December holidays are normally excluded from route evaluations. The union would like a remedy greater than those awarded by most of the arbitrators cited by either party, perhaps in line with arbitrator Rosen and Klein, who increased the remedy due to what they seemed to perceive were egregious violations. The union urges that in this case is similar to those cases because management continued to have routes out of adjustment and to perform inadequate reviews and inspections even in light of Oliver and Tobin awards for the same violations in this facility. Management, on the other hand, would like a remedy that is much more limited than any of the other awards cited. It asked the undersigned to exempt carriers on the OTDL from the remedy, which was not done in any of the awards cited above. It further requests that CCAs be excluded, that only carriers who carried one of the routes found to be overburdened by the 2015 CD route be included, and that the threshold for eligibility for a remedy be work over 8 hours and 15 minutes per day, not simply carriers who worked overtime. Management did not ask for the summer months in December to be carved out of the remedy, as was done in one of the cited awards with a relatively longer remedy period. A monetary remedy is appropriate in this case. Management did not cite any precedent for denying a monetary remedy in circumstances such as this. In such cases, the station is perpetually using overtime just to keep up with regular work, and carriers are pressured to finish their work in less time than actually afforded to their route so they can assist with the excess. It is understandably a particular burden on carriers assigned to the overburdened routes where management may attempt to hold them accountable to a lower time average then the adjustments ultimately proved to be necessary. CDRAP found 18 overburdened routes in a station where there are approximately 40 carriers, meaning that approximately half of the routes were overburdened. There can be no doubt that this discrepancy affected all carriers in the station to some degree. However, the undersigned notes that the 3 routes in particular were overburdened by more than 1 hour. One route was 9 hours and 27 minutes, another was 9 hours and 45 minutes, and a third, which was assigned to a carrier not on the OTDL, was 10 hours and 30 minutes. A fourth was almost 1 hour over at 8 hours and 57 minutes. Management argues that carriers on the OTDL were not harmed by these violations because they wanted to work overtime, and the overburdened routes provided them more overtime to work. The undersigned is somewhat sympathetic to this argument. However, it is also true that the distinction between the carriers on and not on the OTDL is not one that has been recognized by any of the arbitrators cited by the parties in this case. Further, the documentation management provided regarding who was signed up for overtime was incomplete for the total remedy period, and the union correctly pointed out that carriers can take themselves off the OTDL at any time. Based on the evidence in our record and the negative inference due to information not provided to the union, and the fact that it is improbable that the OTDL for the entire remedy period can be recreated, excluding carriers who were on the OTDL from the remedy would be inconsistent with other arbitrators' awards and probably not feasible. However, the undersigned is persuaded that those who are usually not on the ODL suffered additional harm. Another limitation urged by management is having the remedy triggered by work over 8 hours and 15 minutes, not simply 8 hours. The reason for this is because the routes at issue would have been deemed properly adjusted if they had been evaluated at 8:15 or less. And there's that 8:15 again. That's generally the threshold. Arbitrators have taken different approaches, but have not explained why they chose one approach or the other. The most recent decisions in this area have used 8:15 as the standard. The undersigned adopts the 8-hour 15-minute as the threshold standard for remedy. Finally, management insists that CCAs should not be included in the remedy because they are supplemental workforce, contractually available to work up to 11.5 hours per day. They cannot opt in or out of overtime. However, many of the cited awards specifically included utility carriers or PTFs. None of the awards specifically excluded CCAs or PTFs. CCAs do not have a choice regarding whether to work overtime, but they are more likely to be pushed to the extreme when a station is running half of its routes out of adjustments. Like the regular carriers, CCAs would be pressured to finish their assigned work in less than the allotted time in order to assist with the excess work. CCAs are on a career track and, while the contract allows working 11.5 hours per day, it is only when such duration is necessary. Certainly, management should not be allowed to overburden these workers when, but for its own flagrant violation of the national agreement, such lengthy work days would not be necessary. Therefore, CCAs are to be included in the remedy. And how about that? How beautiful is that? Saying that CCAs are more than likely to be pressured more than other carriers to be done in time. And she's right. CCAs are going to be punished if your route's overburdened to get those routes done in 8 hours. So she said, hey, CCAs are going to be included in this remedy. In addition to the arguments put forward by management, there are compelling reasons to believe that there should be some additional remedy for those carriers whose routes were extremely overburdened, such as carrier Remillard, whose route was evaluated at 10:30 and who was not on the OTDL. Award. Grievance is sustained for the flagrant refusal to provide germane information pursuant to clearly articulated request. Each carrier in the station shall be paid an amount that will yield $100 after taxes, assuming the payment is considered taxable wages. The remedies to carriers working overburdened routes for the route adjustment violations shall be as follows. So she gave each carrier $100 just for them not providing the information. Now she's going to get into the overburdened routes. Payment of 1/2 hour at the overtime rate to each carrier at the Middletown Post Office, not usually on the ODL, for work on his or own route, regularly scheduled day in excess of 8 hours and 15 minutes between May 31st, 2014 and October 17th, 2015. That's a hefty little price tag. 2. Payment of 1/2 hour at the straight time rate to each carrier, usually on the ODL, for work on his regularly scheduled days in excess of 9 hours during the relevant time period. That's hefty. Remedies 1 and 2 are mutually exclusive. CCAs are included in the remedies. And claim jurisdiction for 120 days. So there's a fantastic talking about remedies, and they included CCAs. So those are very good decision there. We got 2 more. I hope I didn't just lose everything I just did right there. For some reason, it just stopped. I don't know what happened right there. That would highly upset me. Hopefully it didn't. Let's keep going. All right, this is another great one. It's a very long one, but it's C32286 A, B, C, and D. It's C32286 A, B, C, and D. And it's 4 cases. All of them are the same. And it's from arbitrator Tim Brown, Robert Tim Brown. And here's his discussion. Very lengthy. And the other one's the longest. It's Wolitz. It's very lengthy. So here's the discussion. As any contract case, the union had the burden here of proving that the service had violated the collective bargaining agreement. The 4 issues in this case appeared on their face to be complex, but they all fit together in a way that is relatively easily to analyze. The service regulates its processes through thoroughly and pervasively, and consistent with that, it has in place detailed procedures that prescribe the manner in which carriers must deliver mail and the time within which they are required to do so. Its manuals requires that each route to be structured meticulously and that schemes be constructed for carriers to follow. It has procedures for examining routes and procedures for documenting those examinations and timetables for doing all of this. The union has negotiated for and obtained a voice and a part in that process, and Article 19 of the agreement incorporates by references the handbooks and manuals of the service that relate to wages, hours, and working conditions. The service writes those regulatory documents, but must provide the union with an opportunity to examine any proposed changes in advance and to grieve, on a national level, any change which it believes to be inconsistent with the national agreement or inherently unreasonable. As a result of this structure, it is fair to say that all of the USPS handbook citations set forth in this award are part of the national agreement and bind the parties just as forcibly as the national agreement itself. A service challenge to the inclusion of some provisions will be dealt with below. At least in part as a result of this, the route inspection process and all the regulations that go with it are an important part of the parties' relationship and define the demands and requirements with which carriers must live while delivering mail. The union must, by contract, be kept informed of the steps the service takes to establish, eliminate, and structure routes so that the union has the opportunity to protest if it perceives that the way the service has proceeded in a particular process related to a delivery violates the national agreement or the handbooks and manuals. A corollary to that is that once the union has properly been given the opportunity to have that input and the time to grieve has elapsed, and filed grievance on a particular adjustment process have been dealt with, route inspections and adjustments are binding on all the parties, and for the carriers, the resulting structure defines their work in a very important and specific way. If the requisite notice has been given and whatever objections the union may have dealt with completely, there will be a contractual presumption that the timing and structure of a route is fair and equitable, and carriers will be expected and required to perform those standards. The service maintains a database with mnemonic DOIS, which specifies the amount of time it should take for a carrier to deliver a specified load of mail, and carriers must, each day, if they believe it warranted, request expansion of that time based on excess volume or other factors that will slow the completion of deliveries. Where variables are present that affect those standards one way or another, Adjustments are required, and there are prescribed processes for that. Mail volume changes from day to day. Carriers are absent from work, and work is redistributed. Streets, highways, and bridges are torn, newly built, closed, and delivery times may be adjusted. It is important to be aware, however, that where a properly completed adjustment is in place, carriers will be required, day by day, to be governed by a presumption that those basic calibrations are correct, e.g. that it takes so many minutes to drop mail at 10 houses along a particular route under normal conditions. This is because the parties have, in effect, agreed to a particular procedure for making those measurements, and if that procedure is followed, it is presumed that it will produce a fair result. One consequence of this is that when a carrier on a normal day with normal mail volume and no special circumstances takes longer than allowed to complete deliveries, negative consequences, possibly including discipline, will ensue. When the union steps in to defend the carrier, it will not have the right to assert that a properly completed route inspection and adjustment is faulty, because the process described above will have been completed. This is why the service is held to the handbooks and manuals when it inspects and adjusts routes. It is because the procedure is designed and agreed upon as a way to assure a fair result, and without proper adherence to the procedure, there is no such assurance. An example is found in the street time for a route. Where the route is properly established, it will be assumed, absent the presence of a number of anomalies, that a carrier who can't complete the route in its prescribed time is deficient. Where the route inspection adjustment process fails to follow procedure, it may be argued that it is no less likely that the route is overburdened and the carrier is performing adequately. In the present case, the steps that the union asserts were defective had a certain inescapable logic. They require, because the world and everything on it changes continually, routes be reviewed annually, and that the results of those reviews be shared with the union. They require that prior to route inspection, a review be completed to assure that all the job elements that may affect performance are as they should be, and there is a prescribed list of those elements. They require, so that the union is on notice as to what such a review has identified as needing correction, and perhaps what the review has missed, that the result of the review be shared with the union and each affected carrier substantially before an inspection is begun. They require that a dry run of the inspection be completed, in effect, training each carrier to fill out the required forms that accompany the inspection, so that when they do so during the inspection, they do so correctly. This is designed to protect both parties. A manager is required to review the completed dry run practice forms to assure they are done correctly, which in turn provides some assurance that the carriers will fill out the forms for the actual inspection correctly. They require that management periodically review the routes and delivery times to assure that the routes are adjusted correctly. They require that once a route adjustment is completed and available for review, each carrier must be asked for feedback on any changes, and of course those comments must be reviewed and appraised. An issue must be discussed at the outset. Management's advocate asserted in his closing brief that because it could not be shown that the alleged noncompliance with certain handbook language had a direct impact on wages or working conditions, those sections were not intended to be incorporated by Article 19 into the national agreement. That argument is innovative and somewhat unique, but is not correct. Article 19 states that it incorporates into the agreement those handbooks and manual provisions that relate directly to wages, hours, and working conditions. The advocate's arguments attempts to stand that language on its head. The language is drawn from law developed under the National Labor Relations Act and means that the handbook provision itself must relate directly to wages, hours, and working conditions, and not that in order to make that connection, there must be an act or omission pursuant to that handbook or manual provision that has that effect. The provisions that govern route inspections and adjustments all relate directly to carrier workload, efficiency, and performance standards. They all are part of a matrix that can be and is used when completed and implemented to make judge and discipline carriers and lead them to work harder or less hard every day. They provide procedures for telling carriers exactly how and where to walk, drive, and park, when to eat and take breaks, and when to leave for the street and return to the office. They even prescribe methods for handling and sorting mail down to details such as the number of letters to cradle at one time and where to stage letters when sorting them. It is undeniable that these handbook provisions are integral with carriers' hours and working conditions, and to the extent that they result in more or less overtime being worked, wages. Route adjustments sometimes lead to eliminations of routes and to accessing of carriers, and they, as the union alleged in this case, can affect whether CCA employees become permanent. The service argues in this regard is therefore rejected. In this case, there were serious issues related to these requirements. First, as background to the entire process was first planned in September 2013, at a time when there had been no count and inspection at the unit, required annually for close to 2 years. That made it highly likely that adjustments to routes and catch-up housekeeping would be needed. Next, Union President Horniak testified that while he was advised by Shanks in September of a planned inspection that had the objective of cutting routes, he received no notice of the reviews until after he filed a grievance protesting their omission, with a count and inspection about to begin. The review disclosed multiple deficiencies that required correction, and what should have happened was that Horniak should have been notified of those findings with lead time adequate to assure their correction by management before the count and inspection began. Shanks testified that she passed the review materials on to local manager Rezes for correction. The service did not prevent Rezes as a witness. The service argued that Rezes said in his contentions in the case file that he discussed all these issues raised in the review with the carriers and that Horniak was present for many of these reviews. No dates are mentioned, but it is notable that in one of the case files there is a statement by Rezes which reads in part, "The forms had not been updated as a replacement had not been named for the previous manager who retired. James Rezes was named as the manager of Westlake effective 4/19, and PS Forms 1564A have been printed out and will be given to letter carriers for any updates to approved break and lunch times and locations. When this process has been completed, Forms 1564A will be placed in the route books." April 19th of 2014 was after the completion of the route inspection, and it must be observed that even at the point that Rezes' statement was prospective at least as to that form, and implies that the corrections were ongoing at that point and could not have been implemented prior to the inspections. The case file stated in multiple places that unions asserted that it had received no notice of the review prior to the inspection, so it was no surprise that Horniak testified to just that at hearing. Rezes was not called to rebut that testimony, and as previously noted, his statement in the case file does not say that he did share those results as they related to review, or even that he told Horniak that a review was done. And given that was the main allegation of one of the grievances here, the failure to even say that in a statement in the case file is the equivalent of admission that Horniak's and the union's assertion is true. Rezes only said that says that Horniak was present when issues were discussed with the carriers at service talks and places no date on that. The case file included a list prepared by Shanks of the review of the at least 12 deficiencies that she identified, including Forms 1564A that had not been updated since 2011. There was no date indication of correction of these items. Even if there were, an important purpose of sharing these with the union is to give the union the opportunity to assure that the deficiencies were corrected properly and a good time for the route count to begin. Identification of such shortcomings is management's primary expertise and responsibility, not that of the union, and management will be quick to protect that role when appropriate. The union's responsibility in this regard is to keep informed as to these matters and to police the correction of such omissions when that benefits its members. It could not do that without timely acquisition of that list, and even to the date of hearing, there was no record of just when those items were dealt with, if at all. I have no choice but to conclude that this grievance has been substantiated and this violation did occur. Beach testified that the carriers he interviewed said that they all attended classroom training for the dry run, as did Beach. They said that there was no training at their cases. Their forms were in many cases incomplete and were not returned with corrections. No manager who took part in this process testified at the hearing, even though this issue was far from a surprise. The completed dry run forms were not in the case files. There are statements in the file supporting this, and some did say that the authors completed the forms. The service effectively dealt with the training aspect of the dry run process by citing to the classroom training, but did not deal with the aspect of the incomplete forms and the failure of management to critique the forms to the extent they were completed. My tongue's getting so tired. As some of these sentences aren't making sense. Instead, I'm almost done, so hang in there. Instead, the service argued that this was one of the provisions that did not relate directly to wages, hours, or working conditions, an argument I have already dealt with. It argued that it could not be shown that the violation alleged by the union affected those conditions. While the service is wrong in saying that the language requiring and governing the dry run is not binding, there is some merit to its argument that an adverse effect cannot be shown. There was no such specific showing, but what still remains is the fact that the dry run process was one of the elements in place to assure the integrity of the ensuing inspection, and it must be assumed that it is in the handbook for a reason, especially since the review and correction of the forms is burdensome for management and consumes substantial time on the clock for the carriers. This raises the element to a significant position, and that indicates if the service was willing to require that the cost be incurred, it was important. The conclusion must be that its omission was likely to undercut the quality of the process. I find that this violation was substantiated. Beach testified at length, working from documents in the case file, that the count itself was flawed, pointing to the documents that showed that the service had dropped hours, used low averages instead of high ones, and other issues. These details were not well explored, and the numbers are not examined in detail in either brief. It would be presumptuous of me to substitute my judgment or analysis for that of either party in that regard, and I could decline to do so. There was evidence that management did not, as it was required to do, consult with each carrier after sharing the new routes with them. To obtain feedback on issues was not done, and no service witness had personal knowledge that it was done. I conclude that the route inspection and adjustment was flawed because it departed in significant and meaningful ways from the procedures required in M39 and M41 handbooks, at least one of which, the failure to share the results of the inspection with the union, fenced the union out of the route inspection process. It also produced a result proven to be faulty. If the process was flawed, then, based on the reasoning set forth early in this award, the times established by the inspection no longer may presume to be correct, and it is appropriate to look to the actual work times as a measure of whether the routes are overburdened. This is especially so because the computer run used to implement the adjustments to begin with produced and resulted with both parties agreed was hopelessly jumbled, and now is supposedly repaired through a process that was not made clear at hearing. Subsequent events and their impact on this case. On September 23rd of 2014, the national parties to this agreement entered into an agreement to accomplish route inspections and adjustments in a new and different way. And although the parties here disagreed to some extent as to the effect that the agreement should have on the remedy here, they were in accordance with the new agreement, M1845, City Delivery Route Adjustment Alternative Adjustment Process, CDRAP, precluded a remedy here that would involve any sort of direction to the parties that the routes of this unit be reevaluated. The routes were in fact reevaluated by using CDRAP during the past year, and that reevaluation in effect ended the use of the adjustment and implementation that precipitated this case. Paragraph 4 of that agreement provided in relevant part as follows. As of the date of this agreement, in any zones where a mail count inspection has begun, but adjustments have not yet been implemented, all mail count and inspection data will be forwarded to the district lead team. which will assign a route evaluation and adjustment team to make any needed route adjustments. In zones where a locally developed joint route adjustment process begun as of the date of this agreement, resulting route adjustments may be implemented. In all other zones, locally developed joint route adjustment processes may only be used in accordance with a Memorandum of Understanding, Alternative Evaluation and Adjustment Process. It seems clear that for the situation in this case, where a route adjustment process is no longer ongoing but has rather already been completed and implemented, this new agreement does not apply, except that if the process were to be redone, it would have to go through a CD wrap, which is exactly what has occurred. Remedy. In terms of a remedy in this case, the service argued that once this agreement became effective in September 2014, no arbitrable remedy could go past that point. The union argued that it was seeking status quo ante so that carriers affected by the flawed adjustment process would be placed in the position they would have occupied had the violation claimed here not occurred. The carriers affected by the adjustment here continued to work under the new disputed routes until a new adjustment was implemented by CD Wrap. The service, the union argued, had ample time to correct the errors of its ways through a new inspection and adjustment between June 2014 and September 2014, and need not have been blocked by the institution of the CD Wrap process. The union seeks a remedy which runs from 60 days after the June 9, 2024 institution of the new routes, August 18th through September 23rd. The service has already paid a group of carriers some penalty overtime based on the selection process which it chose. It separated street and office time, eliminated from the remedy carriers who had auxiliary assistance and days not showing any street time, and calculated an average number of hours for those routes. Its payments ran through September 23, 2014, stopping at the point on the theory that the CD Wrap agreement was a bar to going past that point. It seems clear to me while CD Wrap agreement bars an adjustment outside of its parameters past that date, it does not bar a monetary remedy for an already completed flawed adjustment such as this one. Where the remedy does not change routes or delivery time and is merely compensation for the added burden of bad routes, the service argued that it was inappropriate to issue an award beyond payment of overtime. In a situation such as this one, however, when carriers work day to day on routes that are set too tight, they face a situation in which each day they know from experience they do not have enough time to finish without overtime, which they may not work without permission. They seek that permission, and supervisors who are trained to use the calculated routes as a guide push back and resist. And where the carrier cannot obtain permission to work overtime, they must rush and at times fail anyway, facing discipline at times. Over the course of 15 months or more, this causes tangible damage. The argument that most of these carriers like to work overtime is greatly diluted because of this broader picture. The parties seemed in agreement that an award issued by arbitrator Klein, which held in similar circumstances that any carrier who averaged more than 8 hours and 15 minutes on their regular route would be paid a penalty of 50% of their hourly rate for all hours worked on their regularly scheduled day in excess of 8 hours and 15 minutes during the period. The service identified 8 employees who fit that description, eliminated days when there was auxiliary assistance, and paid them according to the formula from the period June 9, September 23, 2014, arguing that the effective date of the CD Wrap procedure should be cut off. The union, which did not separate street from office time nor cull out those who received auxiliary assistance, identified 16 employees but sought the penalty from August 8th through September 23rd of the following year. Arbitrator Klein issued 2 similar awards on this subject in this district. In addition to the one cited above in April 2014, he issued another following a different formula in 2015 in Toledo, Ohio, in a different district. In that case, unlike the early one, he cited 2 prior violations as a factor in awarding this, which is, after all, pay for no time worked. The penalty in that case is a flat daily penalty for every carrier for a period of somewhat over 2 months. Many arbitrators are reluctant to order a remedy which goes beyond just make whole or for losses. This case is different, however. For some other route inspection violation cases, because a remedy that directs a new mail count and adjustment is barred by the CD wrap agreement. If that were not the case, then such an order would approximate make whole in a situation where the persistent violations had not occurred. Another way in which this case is different from some other cases is that the union grieved each of the components of the violations separately, and the service had to know quite early that it had stepped over the line. It may have been eager to achieve headcount reduction and did not do that what it could have done, which was to delay implementation of the route adjustment and remedy its missteps, this avoiding any impact on the carriers and any monetary obligation. If it obtained the carrier comments on the 1840 forms and properly reviewed them prior to implementing the changes, it had to know that the initial computerized results were faulty on the scrambled paths of travel alone, and given its omissions to that point could have started the process over without liability. I'm persuaded that a monetary award is appropriate here. The service urges the street time and office time be separated and the office time calculated based on book numbers independently, and that for any day on which a route received auxiliary assistance, no remedy should be awarded. The union opposes both of these exclusions and presented a roster that included, according to its advocate, all excess overtime of all carriers. I am not persuaded that the separation of street time and office time is appropriate here. As the service urges, because the one has a continual effect on the other, and a delay getting out of the office for any of a number of reasons can set a carrier's street time off. I also am persuaded that carriers who receive auxiliary assistance on certain days should have those days counted, as the extra time is a reflection of the route, not the carrier, and the provisions of auxiliary assistance can be a reflection of any number of circumstances. Additionally, where auxiliary assistance is provided, the respective regular carrier and auxiliary will each be less likely to have excess overtime. If either of them still have excess overtime, they should be compensated for that. The client award involved a period of just over a month in June and July. The period the union seeks to cover in this case runs much, much longer and includes the summer months and December, normally excluded from a route evaluation. The union urges that it exhibit revised Joint 5 be used as prepared by it, saying its accuracy was not challenged at hearing. In reality, the exhibit was not explored in detail, and did not find it comfortable to accept it without such exploration. Instead, I award the following. The grievance is sustained as follows. Each letter carrier who averaged more than 8 hours and 15 minutes a day on the regularly scheduled days, including utility carriers, for the period August 6th through September 25th, shall be paid extra for the additional time over 8:15 worked on those regularly scheduled days, that period of the rate of half the employee's base straight time hourly rate, except that the months of June, July, August, and December of each respective year shall be included, neither for the calculation of averages nor compensation. Employees already paid unilaterally by the service as a remedy in this case shall have that payment deducted from this entitlement. Additionally, the service is directed to comply with the national agreement, the applicable handbooks and manuals, in reviewing, inspecting, and adjusting routes in the future. Heavens. So there's another one. So there's some great sites. And I know that was boring as hell, but hopefully listening to it will get into your mind the contractual provisions that we're dealing with, management's arguments, right? Our arguments as far as how management has screwed these route adjustments up, the different things that we look at, that arbitrators look at, right? There's a lot of things covered under the M39, Section 2, right? And so we're going to hold them to those things. A lot about remedy, 8 hours and 15 minutes. That's usually the standard. All the sites that I looked at way back when I was doing the route count inspection, every site, the arbitrator would generally accept a remedy of $10 a calendar day. That was the general remedy that I had come up with. $10 a calendar day from the date of the adjustment until the date those routes are put back within 8 hours, right? As close to 8 hours of work as possible. That's what I had come up with, and that's generally what I would tell people to ask for is $10 a calendar day. But there's you some good sites with remedies. There's also some good sites talking about different things as far as your street activities, them trying to exclude certain things, restroom breaks, different things that we'll look at, right? So there's you some sites. They will all be up on the episode, and you can pull those off. They're very good ones. Next week, we'll not have an episode, right? The following week, we're going to start getting into some in-depth 6-day count stuff. Everybody should be listening to it. I told you this was going to be boring, and it was, but I wanted to read that to you. That's how I learned, was reading, and hopefully that helped. Hopefully it helped you. If it didn't, get these sites and look at them, study them, and read them. Those will help you more than anything else. More than anything else, getting these sites, reading those, studying those will help you, right? All right. So there's your first episode on the 6-day count. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to get into it. Some good stuff, all right? So I love you all very much. Thank you all so much for listening each week. We're going to get into more stuff, right? There's a lot more stuff coming from Made Arbitration. And videos and Discord and YouTube and stuff like that. We're fixing to start having some fun. I'll talk to y'all in 2 weeks. Take care of yourself. Y'all be safe. Love you. Bye.